Let me tell you something real. Greatness does not start in your hands, your money, your background, or your circumstances. Greatness starts in your mind. Before you ever win in life, you must first win the war between your ears. Because if your mind is wired for fear, excuses, and comfort, no opportunity in the world can save you. But if your mind is wired for discipline, growth, and resilience, nothing can stop you. Most people don't fail because they lack talent. Most people don't fail. They fail because they think small, they think scared, and they think temporary. Your mind's been programmed by your past, by your environment, by the people around you, by what you listen to, and what you repeat to yourself every single day. And if you want a different life, you can't keep running the same mental software. Greatness begins the moment you decide to rewire. You've got to understand this. Your mind is a battlefield. Every day, there's a fight between who you are now and who you could become. One voice says, I stay comfortable. The other says, I get uncomfortable and grow. One voice says, you're tired. The other says, you're not done. The voice that wins is the one you train. And let's talk about comfort. Comfort is the enemy of greatness. Comfort feels good, but comfort kills dream. Comfort whispers, you can do it tomorrow. Comfort tells you, you've done enough. But greatness demands sacrifice. It demands early mornings, late nights, lonely seasons, and relentless discipline. If you want what most people don't have, you must be willing to do what most people willing to do, what most people won't do. Stop negotiating with your excuses. Stop explaining why it's hard. Stop blaming your past. At some point, grown folks take responsibility. Ownership is power. The moment you stop saying, they did this to me, and start saying, what am I gonna do about it, your life changes. You don't need permission to be great. You need commitment. Pain, yes, pain is part of the process. Don't run from it. Pain is not punishment. Pain is instruction. Pain rewires you. Pain teaches you focus. Pain builds resilience. The struggle you're in right now is shaping the strength you're going to need next. But only if you don't quit. Only if you learn instead of complain. What are you feeding your mind? Because whatever you feed it, it multiplies. If you feed it negativity, fear, gossip, and doubt, don't be surprised when your life reflects that. But if you feed your mind vision, discipline, purpose, and faith, your actions will start to align with greatness. Change the input and you will change the output. Greatness is not a one-time decision. It's consistent. It's doing the right thing even when you don't feel like it. Showing up when nobody is clapping. It's being disciplined when motivation disappears. Consistency doesn't just change results, changes identity. Eventually, you don't just do great things. You become great. Look around you. Your environment matters. If you stay around people who think small, talk negative, and settle for average, that mindset will rub off on you. You can't fly with people who are afraid of heights. Sometimes growth requires separation. Not because you're better, but because you're serious. And finally, understand this. Greatness is a daily decision. Not someday, not next year. Today. Every morning you decide who you're going to be. Every choice either rewires you for discipline or rewires you for regret. Rewire your mind. Reject comfort. Embrace discipline. Choose growth. Because when your mind changes, your life has no choice but to follow. Before you ever touch success with your hands, before you ever see progress in your bank account, before the world ever recognizes your name, the real fight has already happened. And it happened in your mind. That's the part nobody tells you. Everybody celebrates the trophy, but nobody talks about the war that had to be won internally before the trophy was even possible. Your mind is not just a tool, it is the battlefield where your future is decided. Every breakthrough, every failure, every habit, every excuse, every comeback is first conceived in thought. Long before you quit on life, you quit in your head. Long before you rise mentally. That's why the first battleground is not the economy, your past, your critics, or your lack of resources. The first battleground is between your ears. Most people are losing in life, not because life is unfair, but because their mind is undisciplined. They let fear speak louder than faith. They let comfort speak louder than purpose. They let yesterday speak louder than possibility. And the dangerous thing about the mind is this. It believes what you tell it repeatedly. If you keep telling yourself you're tired, you will be. If you keep telling yourself you can't, you won't. If you keep telling yourself this is just how it is, you'll stay right where you are. The mind doesn't argue with repetition. It obeys it. That's why the battle is so intense. Because the mind can either be your greatest weapon or your greatest enemy. You have to understand that every day, the world is fighting for control of your thinking. Social media is fighting for it. Your past is fighting for it. Your environment is fighting for it. The people around you are fighting for it. Even your own habits are fighting for it. And if you don't take authority over your mind, something else will. That's not philosophy. That's reality. A mind without discipline becomes a slave to circumstance. A mind without vision becomes addicted to survival. A mind without purpose settles for average and calls it peace. The battleground shows up the moment you wake up. Before your feet hit the floor, a voice speaks. Sometimes it says, "Oh, go back to sleep." Sometimes it says that you don't feel like it today. Sometimes it says, "What's the point?" That voice is not reality, it's conditioning. And greatness begins when you stop obeying every thought that crosses your mind. Just because a thought shows up doesn't mean it deserves a seat at the table. Just because you feel something doesn't mean you have to act on it. Discipline starts when you learn to question your thoughts instead of surrendering to them. A lot of people confuse thoughts with truth. They think because they feel afraid, danger must be real. Because they feel tired, rest must be required. Because they feel unqualified, they must be incapable. But feelings are not facts. Feelings are signals, not commands. And if you allow feelings to run your life, you'll never cross into greatness. Greatness requires you to move even when your emotions beg you to stop. It requires you to stand firm when your mind tells you to retreat. It requires you to fight internal battles nobody else can see. The mind loves comfort because comfort feels safe. Comfort tells you to stay where you are. Comfort tells you not to risk embarrassment, rejection, or failure. Comfort whispers, at least you're surviving. But survival's not the goal. You were not created just to get by, just to exist, just to make it through another day. There's more in you than routine. There's more in you than excuses. There's more in you than what you settle for. But you'll never access it if your mind is wired to avoid discomfort at all costs. The battleground intensifies when adversity shows up. When things don't go your way, your mind starts negotiating with quitting. It starts replaying past failures. It starts magnifying obstacles. It starts shrinking your vision. And this is where most people lose, not because the obstacle is too big, but because their mind convinces them it is. The obstacle outside is rarely as powerful as the doubt inside. That's why two people can face the same chat and have completely different outcomes. One sees it as a wall. The other sees it as training. One sees it as proof they should stop. The other sees it as confirmation they're being stretched. You have to train your mind to respond differently to pressure. Pressure does not destroy you, it reveals you. It exposes what you've been feeding your mind in private. If you've been feeding it fear, pressure will produce panic. If you've been feeding it excuses, pressure will produce quitting. But if you've been feeding it discipline, belief, and vision, pressure will produce focus. The mind performs according to preparation. You don't rise to the occasion. You fall to the level of your mental conditioning. And let's talk about self-talk, because that's where battles are either won or lost. Nobody talks to you more than you do. Nobody influences you more than you do. That inner voice shapes your confidence, your courage, and your consistency. If your self-talk is weak, your life will be weak. If your self-talk is negative, your actions will reflect it. You can't constantly tell yourself you're not enough and then expect to live an exceptional life. You can't rehearse failure mentally and then be shocked when it shows up physically. The mind needs direction. If you don't give it vision, it will default to fear. If you don't give it goals, it will cling to distraction. If you don't give it purpose, it will chase pleasure. And pleasure without purpose leads to emptiness. That's why so many people are busy but unfulfilled. They're active but stagnant. Their mind is occupied but not aligned. They've never decided what they stand for, so they fall for anything that feels good in the moment. Winning the mental battle requires awareness. You have to catch yourself when your thinking drifts toward limitation. You have to interrupt patterns that no longer serve you. You have to challenge beliefs that were formed in pain, trauma, or disappointment. Just because a belief was formed early doesn't mean it's accurate. Just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's true. Some of the thoughts controlling your life were installed by people who were broken themselves. And until you confront them, They'll keep running your future. The mind also remembers vividly. It stores failures, embarrassment, rejection, and disappointment. And if you don't manage those memories properly, they become weapons against you. Your past will try to convince you that your future should look the same. It will tell you, well, last time didn't work, so why try again? But growth requires selective memory. You must remember lessons without reliving defeat. You must extract wisdom without carrying shame. The past is a classroom, not a prison. On this battleground, discipline is your shield. Discipline is not punishment, it's protection. It protects you from making emotional decisions. It protects you from momentary weakness. It protects you from sabotaging long-term vision for short-term comfort. A disciplined mind does not ask, how do I feel? It asks, what is required? And that question alone separates average from elite. The mind will also test you with delay. Progress will feel slow. Results will seem invisible. Effort will appear unrewarded. And in those moments, your mind will question whether it's worth it. That's when mental toughness is built. Not when you're winning, but when you're waiting. Waiting teaches patience. Waiting teaches faith. Waiting teaches enduring. If you can stay consistent when nothing is happening, you're training your mind for greatness. You have to stop expecting motivation to save you. Motivation is emotional. It comes and goes. The battleground is one with commitment. Commitment says, I'll do it even when I don't feel like it. Commitment says, I'll keep going even when it's hard. Commitment says, I made a decision and my feelings don't get a vote. When your mind understands that quitting is no longer an option, it adapts. It finds strength you didn't know you had. The mind also craves identity. It wants to know who you are. And whatever identity you accept, your behavior will follow. If you see yourself as someone who quits, you'll quit. If you see yourself as someone who overcomes, you'll fight. Identity is the blueprint. That's why you must stop labeling yourself by your struggles and start defining yourself by your standards. You are not your mistakes. You are not your setbacks. You are not your worst moments. You are who you decide to become consistently. This battleground doesn't end after one victory. It's a daily. Every morning you must reassert control. Every day you must renew your discipline. Every day you must choose growth over comfort. And some days the fight will be harder than others. Some days you'll feel strong. Other days you'll feel exhausted, but greatness is not built on how you feel on a good day. It's built on how you show up on hard ones. The world will not slow down for you to figure it out. Life will keep moving. Challenges will keep coming. And if your mind is not trained, you'll constantly feel overwhelmed. But when your mind is fortified, when it's wired for resilience, you don't panic under pressure. You don't crumble under criticism. You don't retreat when things get uncomfortable. You stand firm because you've already won the hardest fight internally. The battleground teaches you this final truth. You are not weak. You are untrained. You are not incapable. You are undisciplined. You are not lacking potential. You are lacking mental alignment. And the moment you accept responsibility for your mind, everything changes. You stop blaming. You stop complaining. You stop waiting. You start building. Because once you conquer your mind, circumstances lose their power. Once you control your thinking, fear loses its voice. Once you discipline your thoughts, your actions follow. And when your actions align with purpose, greatness becomes inevitable. The first battleground decides everything. Win there, and the rest is only a matter of time. Comfort feels harmless at first. It feels like rest. It feels like balance. It feels like peace. But comfort, when it becomes a lifestyle, is one of the most dangerous addictions a human being can have. Not because comfort is evil, but because comfort quietly convinces you to stop growing. It doesn't attack you loudly. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It tells you you've done enough. It tells you you deserve this break. It tells you you can push later. And before you realize it, later becomes never. Potential becomes regret. And greatness becomes a story you tell yourself about what you could have been. The addiction to comfort doesn't look like failure. That's why it's so powerful. It looks like routine. It looks like stability. It looks like being reasonable. It looks like playing it safe. But safety, when it replaces purpose, slowly kills the fire inside you. You stop challenging yourself. You stop stretching. You stop risking embarrassment, rejection, or discomfort. And the scariest part is this. You can be comfortable and miserable at the same time. You can be safe and unfulfilled. You can be surviving while your soul is starving. Comfort trains your mind to avoid resistance. The moment something feels hard, your mind starts looking for an exit. The moment pressure shows up, your mind searches for relief. And relief becomes the goal instead of growth. That's why so many people quit at the first sign of difficulty. Not because they can't handle it, but because they've conditioned themselves to escape discomfort instead of enduring it. The mind becomes addicted to ease the same way the body becomes addicted to sugar, always craving what feels good now, regardless of long-term damage. You have to understand this truth deeply. Everything you want in life is on the other side of discomfort. Confidence is on the other side of discomfort. Discipline is on the other side of discomfort. Mastery is on the other side of discomfort. Growth does not happen in places where you are fully at ease. Growth happens when you are stretched, challenged, pressured, and sometimes exhausted. But the addiction to comfort convinces you that discomfort is a sign you are doing something wrong, when in reality, it's often proof that you're doing something right. Comfort is seductive because it rewards you immediately. Discipline delays reward. Comfort gives you pleasure now and pain later. Discipline gives you pain now and pleasure later. And the human brain left untrained will always choose what feels good in the moment. That's why rewiring your mind requires intentional resistance to comfort. You have to teach yourself to tolerate discomfort without panicking. You have to normalize struggle without dramatizing it. You have to stop treating difficulty like an emergency and start seeing it as a requirement. The addiction to comfort also shows up in habits. You choose convenience over consistency. You choose easy over effective. You choose familiar over transformative. And every time you do, you reinforce the belief that growth is optional. But greatness is never accidental. It is the result of repeated choices that prioritize long-term vision over short-term relief. Nobody accidentally becomes disciplined. Nobody accidentally becomes resilient. Nobody accidentally becomes great. They choose discomfort again and again until it becomes part of who they are. Comfort also affects your standards. When you get used to comfort, you lower the bar to protect. You stop setting challenging goals because they threaten your ease. You stop holding yourself accountable because accountability is uncomfortable. You stop demanding excellence because excellence requires effort. And slowly, your standards shrink to match your comfort zone. You start celebrating survival instead of progress. You start calling average enough, and once enough replaces excellence, growth comes to a halt. One of the most dangerous lies comfort tells you is that you have time. It says, there's no rush. It says, you can do it later. It says, you're still young, or you still have options. And while time is real, urgency is rare. Comfort kills urgency. It makes you believe tomorrow is guaranteed. It makes you believe opportunity will wait. It makes you believe motivation will magically return. But time doesn't wait for comfort. Life doesn't pause because you're not ready. And one day, you wake up and realize years passed while you were getting comfortable. Breaking the addiction to comfort requires honesty. You have to ask yourself hard questions. Where am I choosing ease over growth? Where am I avoiding discomfort that I know will make me better? Where am I settling because pushing feels inconvenient? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are necessary. Self-awareness is uncomfortable before it is empowering. You can't change what you refuse to confront. Comfort also hides behind how I'm protecting my peace. I'm protecting my peace. I want to stress myself. I'm just being realistic. Sometimes those statements are valid. Rest matters. Balance matters. But when they become shields against effort, they turn into excuses dressed as wisdom. There's a difference between rest that prepares you and rest that replaces you. There's a difference between protecting your peace and protecting your laziness. Growth requires discernment, not avoidance. Your body and mind adapt to whatever you repeatedly expose them to. If you repeatedly expose yourself to comfort, discomfort feels unbearable. If you repeatedly expose yourself to challenge, discomfort becomes manageable. That's why what feels too hard today can feel normal tomorrow if you don't quit. Discomfort is not permanent. Avoidance is. The pain of discipline fades. The pain of regret lingers. And regret is far heavier than effort ever was. Comfort also weakens resilience. When life inevitably hits you with pressure you didn't choose, an untrained mind collapses because it never learned how to endure. It never learned how to stay calm under stress. It never learned how to push through resistance. People addicted to comfort don't fail when life is easy. They fail when life is hard. And life will be hard. That part is non-negotiable. The only question is whether you trained for it or avoided it. Breaking this addiction means intentionally choosing discomfort even when you don't feel like it. Doing the work when motivation is gone. Getting up when staying in bed feels better. Speaking up when silence feels safer. Pushing when quitting feels justified. These are not dramatic moments. They are small daily decisions that rewire your tolerance for challenge. Over time, discomfort stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like a signal that you're expanding. You must also change how you talk about discomfort. Stop calling suffering. Stop exaggerating it. Stop romanticizing ease. Difficulty does not mean disaster. Hard does not mean impossible. Uncomfortable does not mean unsafe. Most of the discomfort you avoid will not kill you. It will sharpen you. But your mind has to be trained to recognize that truth instead of reacting emotionally. Comfort is also contagious. The people you surround yourself with influence your tolerance for challenge. If everyone around you avoids effort, complains about pressure, and celebrates doing the bare minimum, that mindset will normalize comfort. You'll start to feel strange for pushing yourself. You'll feel guilty for wanting more. You'll feel pressure to slow down. That's why growth often requires separation. Not because you're better, but because you're serious. The addiction to comfort also shows up in how you handle boredom. When things get repetitive, uncomfortable, or slow, your mind looks for stimulation, scrolling, eating, distracting. Anything to avoid sitting with the discomfort of discipline. But mastery is built in boredom. Progress is built in repetition. Greatness is built when you can do the same difficult thing consistently without applause. Comfort hates boredom. Discipline, use it. You have to redefine what a normal feels like. For most people, normal is ease. For high performers, normal is effort. They don't wait for things to feel easy. They don't expect the process to be comfortable. They expect resistance. And because they expect it, they don't panic when it shows up. They don't interpret discomfort as a signal to stop. They interpret it as confirmation they're on the path. Breaking the addiction to comfort does not mean living in exhaustion. It means living with intention. It means choosing growth even when it's inconvenient. It means resting strategically, not escaping habitually. It means understanding that comfort is a reward, not a lifestyle. You earn comfort through discipline. You don't build discipline through comfort. Your future self is shaped by the discomfort you are willing to endure today. The confidence you want is on the other side of the fear you avoid. The strength you want is on the other side of the effort you resist. The life you want is on the other side of the comfort you cling to. And no one is coming to push you. No one is coming to force you. This is a personal decision. The moment you start choosing discomfort on purpose, something shifts inside you. You stop fearing hard days. You stop running from pressure. You stop negotiating with excuses. Your mind begins to trust you. It learns that when things get tough, you won't abandon the mission. And that trust builds self-respect. Self-respect builds confidence. Confidence fuels action. Action creates results. Comfort promises safety, but discipline creates freedom. Comfort keeps you dependent on circumstances. Discipline makes you independent of them. Comfort limits your capacity. Discipline expands it. And while comfort feels good today, discipline feels good forever. The addiction to comfort ends the moment you decide that growth matters more than ease, purpose matters more than pleasure, and who you're becoming matters more than how you feel right now. Break the addiction and you don't just change your habits. You change your identity. You become someone who can handle pressure, endure discomfort, and keep moving forward even when it's hard. And that person is unstoppable, not because life becomes easy, but because comfort no longer controls you. Excuses are easy because they protect the ego. They give you a reason to stay the same without feeling guilty about it. They sound logical. They sound reasonable. They sound convincing, especially when you repeat them long enough. But here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Excuses don't remove responsibility. They only delay growth. Every excuse you make today quietly steals from the future you say you want. And the longer you live in excuses, the harder it becomes to recognize how much control you've actually given away. Ownership is uncomfortable because it forces you to look in the mirror without filters. It doesn't allow you to hide behind circumstances, people, timing, or luck. Ownership says, I may not be responsible for everything that happened to me, but I am responsible for what happens next. That sense alone separates leaders from victims. Victims explain, leaders adjust. Victims blame, leaders build. Victims wait, leaders work. Excuses feel powerful in a moment because they remove pressure. The moment you say, it's not my fault, your mind relaxes. You don't have to change. You don't have to stretch. You don't have to risk failure again. But that relief is temporary. Over time, excuses don't make you feel better. They make you feel smaller. They slowly erode your confidence because deep down, you know you're capable of more, and nothing drains the soul faster than knowing you're settling while pretending you're justified. One of the most dangerous things about excuses is that they don't always sound negative. Sometimes they sound responsible. I'm waiting for the right time. They are just fear wearing professional clothes. Growth doesn't wait for perfect conditions. Progress doesn't require certainty. Ownership begins where comfort ends. The mind loves excuses because excuses preserve identity. If you fail and it's someone else's fault, your self-image stays intact. If you don't try and blame circumstance, your ego stays safe. But greatness requires ego death. It requires you to accept that some of your struggles are not because life is unfair, but because your habits are inconsistent. Some of your limitations are not because opportunity is missing, but because discipline is. And that realization hurts, but it also frees you. Ownership is power because it gives you control. The moment you say, this is not on me, you regain authority over your life. You stop waiting for permission. You stop waiting for rescue. You stop waiting for conditions to improve. You start asking better questions. Not why did this happen to me, but what can I do differently? Not who failed me, but how can I improve? Those questions change outcomes. Excuses keep you focused on the past. Ownership keeps you focused on solutions. Excuses keep you explaining. Ownership keeps you executing. And execution, even when imperfect, always beats intention without action. The world does not reward potential. It rewards progress. It rewards progress. It rewards consistency. You can have the best reasons in the world for why something didn't happen, but reasons don't build results. Many people confuse ownership with self-blame. They think taking responsibility means beating themselves up, drowning in guilt or reliving mistakes. That's not ownership. That's self-punishment. Ownership is not about shame. It's about clarity. It's about seeing reality clearly enough to change it. You acknowledge the mistake, extract the lesson, and move forward stronger. No drama, no excuses, no denial. Excuses also weaken trust, especially self-trust. Every time you promise yourself you'll do something and then excuse your way out of it, your mind remembers. Over time, your mind stops believing you. Motivation fades because motivation depends on trust. Why would your mind give you energy if history shows you don't follow through? Ownership rebuilds that trust. When you do what you said you would do, even when it's hard, you restore credibility with yourself. And self-trust is the foundation of confidence. Blame is another disguise of excuses. It feels justified. Sometimes it even is justified. People do wrong things. Systems are flawed. Life is unfair. All of that can be true and still irrelevant to your growth because blame keeps your focus outward. Ownership turns inward. And the only place you can actually make change is inside your own actions. Blame might explain why something happened, but it will never change what happens next. Ownership also forces you to confront uncomfortable patterns of procrastination, patterns of inconsistency, patterns of quitting when things get hard, patterns of starting strong and finishing weak. These patterns don't disappear with excuses. They deepen. Ownership interrupts them. It forces you to admit, I've been here before. I know how this ends if I don't change. That awareness is painful, but it's also the doorway to transformation. The reason many people resist ownership is because it removes the safety net. When you own your choices, you can't hide anymore. If you fail, you feel it fully. If you succeed, you can't credit luck alone. Ownership demands maturity. It demands emotional strength. It demands that you stop being entertained by your own stories and start being honest about your habits. Ownership also changes how you see obstacles. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You start asking, what is this teaching me? You stop seeing problems as punishments and start seeing them as feedback. Feedback is information. Information is power. Power allows you to adjust strategy instead of surrendering vision. Excuses keep you reactive. Ownership makes you proactive. Reactive people wait for circumstances to force change. Proactive people change before circumstances break them. Reactive people live in cycles of frustration. Proactive people live in progress. And progress, even slow progress, creates momentum. Momentum silences doubt better than motivation ever could. There's also a difference between explanation and excuse. Explanation seeks understanding to improve. Excuse seeks justification to stay the same. Ownership allows explanation but rejects excuse. You can acknowledge difficulty without surrendering responsibility. You can admit something was hard without concluding it was impossible. That distinction matters because the way you interpret difficulty determines whether you grow or stall. Ownership also reshapes discipline. When you stop blaming external factors, you start controlling internal ones. You focus on sleep, habits, preparation, effort, and consistency. You stop waiting to feel like it. Stop negotiating with moods. You do what needs to be done because you decided who you want to become. Discipline stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like alignment. One of the hardest moments in growth is realizing that nobody is coming to save you. No perfect mentor, no perfect opportunity, no perfect timing. That realization can feel lonely, but it's also empowering. Because once you accept that responsibility is yours, you stop feeling helpless. You stop feeling stuck. You realize that even small actions done consistently can change the direction of your life. Ownership doesn't mean you never fail again. It means when you fail, you don't stay down. You don't make excuses for repeating the same mistakes. You adjust faster. You recover quicker. You learn deeper. And over time, those adjustments compound into transformation. Excuses shrink your world. Ownership expands it. Excuses limit options. Ownership creates them. Excuses keep you talking. Ownership keeps you moving. And movement, even imperfect movement, creates clarity. Clarity does not come from thinking more. It comes from doing more. You will never feel completely ready to take full ownership. That feeling doesn't arrive first. Action does. You step into responsibility before confidence shows up. You act before certainty arrives. And through action, your identity shifts. You stop seeing yourself as someone who reacts to life and start seeing yourself as someone who directs it. Ownership also changes how you handle success. You don't get arrogant because you know how much effort it took. You don't get lazy because you know consistency created it. You don't fear losing it because you trust your process. Ownership builds humility and confidence at the same time. A rare but powerful combination. At some point, excuses must expire. The story you've been telling yourself has to end, not because your pain wasn't real, but because your future deserves more than endless explanation. Ownership is the moment you stop asking for understanding and start demanding results from yourself. And yes, ownership is heavy. It comes with pressure. It comes with pressure. It comes with accountability. It comes with discomfort. But it also comes with freedom. Because once you own your life, no one else controls it. Once you own your habits, no excuse can trap you. Once you own your choices, progress becomes inevitable. Replace excuses with ownership and everything changes. Not overnight, not magically, but steadily, quietly, powerfully. You stop wasting energy defending where you are and start investing energy into becoming who you're capable of being. And that shift, more than talent, more than luck, more than timing, is what separates those who stay stuck from those who ride. Your mind is always being fed, whether you are aware of it or not. Every word you hear, every image you see, every conversation you engage in, every thought you repeat is shaping the direction of your life. The mind does not stay neutral. It absorbs, processes, and multiplies whatever you consistently give it. And sooner or later, what you feed your mind shows up in your behavior, your habits, your decisions, and ultimately your results. You don't become what you want. You become what you consume. Most people underestimate the power of mental diet. They pay attention to what they eat physically, but ignore what they consume mentally. They guard calories, but leave their mind wide open to negativity, doubt, fear, comparison, gossip, and distraction. Then they wonder why they feel unmotivated, unfocused, and stuck. You cannot constantly feed your mind junk and expect it to produce excellence. Just like the body, the mind reflects the quality of its nutrition. Your thoughts are not random. They are the product of repeated exposure. If you surround yourself with pessimism, your mind will default to pessimism. If you surround yourself with excuses, your mind will normalize excuses. If you surround yourself with vision, discipline, and growth-oriented thinking, your mind will begin to align with those patterns. This is not motivation, it's conditioning. Over time, your mind starts thinking in the direction it has been trained. The danger is that much of what feeds your mind feels harmless. Complaining feels normal. Negativity feels relatable. Distraction feels relaxing. Entertainment feels deserved. But harmless does not mean harmless over time. A little negativity every day compound. A little distraction every day compounds. A little self-doubt repeated daily compound. Eventually, those small inputs create massive internal resistance. You don't suddenly lose belief. You slowly starve it. You slowly starve it. What you feed your mind determines what you tolerate. If you constantly consume content that normalizes laziness, drama, and mediocrity, your standards drop without you noticing. You start accepting things you once said you would never accept. You start settling for things you once said you deserve more than. Your appetite shapes your expectations, and expectations shape your effort. Your inner dialogue is one of the most powerful sources of mental nutrition. The way you talk to yourself matters more than how anyone else talks to you. If your self-talk is critical, limiting, and harsh, your mind will begin to resist effort. It will associate action with punishment instead of growth. But if your self-talk is firm, honest, and encouraging, your mind becomes a place of strength instead of sabotage. Many people unknowingly rehearse failure in their minds. They imagine what could go wrong. They replay past mistakes. They anticipate embarrassment. They prepare for disappointment. Then they wonder why confidence feels so far away. Confidence is not built by pretending fear doesn't exist. It is built by feeding the mind evidence of capability, effort, and progress. You don't starve fear by ignoring it. You starve it by feeding courage repeated. Your environment is also feeding your mind. The people you spend time with, the conversations you engage in, the attitudes you tolerate, all of it becomes mental input. If everyone around you complains, your mind learns to complain. If everyone around wants responsibility, your mind learns avoidance. If everyone around you pushes, grows, and challenges themselves, your mind adapts upward. You may think you are immune, but you are not. Proximity influences perspective. The mind does not care whether information is true or false. It cares whether it is repeated. Repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity creates belief. That's why lies told often enough start to feel real. That's why negative labels stick. That's why limiting beliefs feel convincing. If you want to change what you believe, you must change what you repeatedly hear, see, and say. New input creates new pathways. What you feed your mind also determines how you interpret adversity. A mind fed with negativity sees obstacles as confirmation to quit. A mind fed with growth sees obstacles as instruction. The same challenge can either break you or build you depending on the mental nutrition you've been consuming. When pressure hits, you don't suddenly become someone else. You reveal what you've been feeding yourself all along. Discipline in mental intake is just as important as discipline in action. You cannot watch chaos all day and expect peace at night. You cannot consume distraction all day and expect focus when it's time to work. You cannot feed your mind fear. You expect courage to show up on demand. The mind performs according to preparation, not desire. Many people say they want to change their life, but they refuse to change their inputs. They want new results with old information. They want growth while consuming stagnation. They want clarity while drowning in noise. Change does not begin with motivation. It begins with subtraction. Removing what weakens you is often more important than adding what strengthens you. Feeding your mind intentionally does not mean avoiding reality or pretending everything is positive. It means choosing inputs that empower instead of paralyze. It means consuming truth that challenges you, not comfort that numbs you. It means exposing yourself to ideas that stretch your thinking, not just entertain it. Growth-oriented input is often uncomfortable because it confronts habits you rather keep. Your mind also feeds on what you focus on. Attention is nutrition. Whatever you consistently focus on grows. If you focus on problems, problems multiply. If you focus on progress, momentum builds. If you focus on lack, dissatisfaction deepens. If you focus on opportunity, creativity expands. Focus is a choice, even when circumstances are difficult. And that choice determines the direction of your energy, what you feed your mind in private shapes, how you perform in public. The hours spent reading, listening, reflecting, and learning quietly compound into confidence and clarity when it matters. Nobody sees the internal work, but everyone sees the external results. Mastery begins long before performance. It begins in mental preparation. The mind also requires rest, but rest is different from mental junk food. Rest restores. Junk distracts. Rest strengthens. Junk weakens. Mindless consumption does not recharge the mind. It dulls it. True rest leaves you clearer. Distraction leaves you foggy. Knowing the difference is critical if you want sustained growth. Feeding your mind with purpose means aligning input with identity. Who are you becoming? What kind of person are you building? Your consumption should support that direction. If your goal is discipline, feed your mind discipline. If your goal is leadership, feed your mind leadership. If your goal is growth, feed your mind challenge. Random input creates random results. The mind resists change at first. New ideas feel uncomfortable. New perspectives challenge old beliefs. That discomfort is not danger, it is expansion. The mind stretches before it strengthens. If you retreat at the first sign of discomfort, you return to familiar limits. If you persist, the new becomes normal. Your habits are the physical expression of your mental diet. A focused mind creates focused action. A distracted mind creates scattered effort. A confident mind creates decisive movement. A fearful mind creates hesitation. You cannot separate thought from behavior. One feeds the other. Many people wait for inspiration to change what they feed their mind. But inspiration follows action, not the other way around. You choose better input first. You guard your mental space first. And slowly your motivation rises to meet your discipline. Waiting to feel like it keeps you stuck. Acting despite resistance rewires your appetite. Feeding your mind well also means being selective with negativity. Not all criticism is bad, but constant exposure to cynicism erodes belief. There is a difference between realism and defeatism. Realism acknowledges difficulty and moves anyway. Defeatism magnifies difficulty and surrenders. Know the difference. Choose voices that challenge you to rise, not settle. Your mind is powerful, but it is also impressionable. It believes what it hears most often. If you don't consciously choose what feeds it, it will consume whatever is available. And whatever is available is often designed for distraction, not development. Protecting your mind is not weakness. It is wisdom. Over time, intentional mental nutrition changes your default state. You begin to think differently without forcing it. You respond instead of react. You focus instead of scatter. You persist instead of quit. Not because life got easier, but because your mind got stronger. Greatness is not built by occasional inspiration. It's built by consistent nourishment. It is built by consistent nourishment. Day after day, choice after choice, input after input, you feed your mind discipline and it gives you resilience. You feed your mind vision and it gives you direction. You feed your mind fear and it gives you hesitation. The return is inevitable. If you want to change your life, start by changing what you allow into your mind. Be ruthless with your inputs. Be intentional with your focus. Be disciplined with your attention. Because in the end, you don't rise to what you hope for. You sink or soar to what you've been feeding yourself all along. Consistency is not glamorous. It does not trend. It does not get applause in the beginning. It does not give you instant validation or immediate reward. But consistency is a quiet force that rewrites who you believe you are. It reshapes identity, not through motivation, but through proof. Every time you show up, even when you don't feel like it, your mind records evidence. And over time, that evidence becomes belief. You stop hoping you are disciplined and start knowing you are. That is the power of consistency. It doesn't just change outcomes, it changes self-perception. Most people think identity comes first and behavior follows. They believe once they feel confident, focused, or motivated, then they'll act accordingly. But in reality, behavior comes first. Identity follows repetition. You don't wake up one day believing you are strong. You become strong by repeatedly doing hard things. You don't suddenly see yourself as committed. You earn that identity by staying consistent when quitting feels justified. The mind updates identity based on patterns, not promises. Every action you repeat is a vote for the person you are becoming. One workout does not make you fit. One focused session does not make you disciplined. One brave decision does not make you confident. Repeated actions compound into character. Consistency is how the mind collects evidence. And once the evidence is overwhelming, doubt loses its argument. The reason consistency is so powerful is because it bypasses emotion. Motivation is unreliable. Feelings change. Energy fluctuates. Circumstances shift. But consistency does not depend on how you feel. It depends on what you decided. When you commit to consistency, you stop asking, oh, do I feel like it? And start asking, what does the person I'm becoming do today? That shift removes negotiation. And when negotiation ends, progress accelerates. Inconsistency creates identity confusion. One day you push, the next day you quit. One day you're disciplined, the next day you disappear. Your mind doesn't know who you are. So it defaults to the safest identity, someone who stops when things get hard. That's not because you are weak, but because your actions taught your mind that quitting is an option. Consistency removes that option. It trains the mind to expect follow through. Every time you break a promise to yourself, even a small one, your mind takes note. Over time, broken promises erode self-trust. You start doubting your own words. You hesitate to commit because history tells you that you might not follow through. Consistency rebuilds that trust. When you do what you said you would do, especially when it's inconvenient, you restore credibility with yourself. And self-trust is the foundation of confidence. Consistency also simplifies life. When something becomes non-negotiable, decision fatigue disappear. You don't debate whether to show up, you just do. You don't rely on willpower. You rely on structure. This frees mental energy for growth instead of argument. The most disciplined people are not constantly fighting themselves. They've already decided. Small, consistent actions outperform intense, but inconsistent effort every time. Intensity feels productive, but without consistency, it fades. Consistency feels slow, but it compounds. The mind learns through repetition. Neural pathways strengthen through frequency, not force. That's why daily effort, even when modest, rewires the brain more effectively than occasional bursts of motivation. Consistency is also how fear is neutralized. Fear thrives on uncertainty. When you act consistently, fear loses leverage. You stop wondering whether you can do it because you're already doing it. Action silences doubt more effectively than thinking ever will. Over time, fear stops showing up because it's no longer useful. Identity is shaped by what you do when no one is watching. Public wins are built on private consistency. The discipline you practice in silence becomes confidence and pressure. When challenges arise, you don't panic because you train. Your response is automatic, not emotional. Consistency turns effort into instinct. Many people quit too early because they don't see immediate results. But consistency works below the surface first. It rewires habits. It reshapes self-image. It builds capacity. The external results lag behind internal change. If you stop because you can't see progress, you interrupt the process just before it pays off. Consistency requires patience, but patience rewards you with permanence. Consistency also teaches humility. You stop chasing shortcuts. You stop believing overnight success. You respect the process. You understand that greatness is built in repetition, not moments. This humility keeps you grounded and focused. It protects you from ego-driven decisions that sabotage long-term growth. When consistency becomes part of your identity, discipline no longer feels like punishment, it feels like alignment. You're not forcing yourself to act against who you are. You're acting in harmony with who you become. That's when effort feels lighter, even when the work is hard. Resistance decreases because your actions match your self-image. Consistency also builds resilience. When setbacks occur, and they will, you don't fall apart. You don't spiral. You return to routine. Routine becomes your anchor. While others are emotionally reactive, you are structurally stable. Consistency gives you something to return to when motivation disappears. You don't need to be extreme. You need to be reliable. Extreme effort burns out. Reliable effort builds. Reliability creates trust with others and with yourself. Over time, people around you begin to expect excellence from you, not because you talk about it, but because you demonstrate it repeatedly. Consistency rewrites your internal narrative. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who does. Trying leaves room for quitting. Doing implies completion. That shift changes how you approach challenges. You don't test commitment, you execute it. Even your failures change under consistency. You don't interpret failure as proof you should stop. You see it as part of the process. Consistency reframes setbacks as adjustments, not endings. You keep moving, refining, improving. That persistence is what separates growth from stagnation. Consistency also protects you from mood-based living. When your actions depend on how you feel, your progress is unstable. When your actions depend on your standards, your progress is steady. Consistency anchors you to standards instead of emotions. And standards don't fluctuate. The identity you want is already waiting on the other side of repeated action. You don't have to chase it. You have to practice it. Day by day, choice by choice. Showing up even when it's boring, even when it's hard, even when no one notices. Consistency does not demand perfection. It demands return. You will miss days. You will slip. What matters is that you come back. Returning quickly is a form of consistency. It teaches your mind that deviation is temporary, not identity. And that lesson is powerful. When consistency rewrites your identity, you no longer rely on external validation. You don't need applause to keep going. Your confidence is internal. It's based on evidence, not opinion. You know who you are because you've proven it to yourself. Eventually, consistency compounds into mastery. Skills sharpen, focus deepens, confidence solidifies. What once felt difficult becomes normal. What once felt impossible becomes expected. And from the outside, it looks like talent. But you know the truth. It was repetition. Consistency is not exciting, but it is unstoppable. It does not rush, but it never retreats. It builds quietly, steadily, relentlessly. And once it reshapes your identity, quitting no longer feels natural. Showing up does. That is the real power of consistency. It doesn't just help you achieve goals. It changes who you believe you are. And once your identity changes, your future follows automatically. Most people don't fail because they lack ability, resources, or opportunity. Most people fail because they never rewire the internal conversations that shape their daily decisions. They wake up every morning already defeated, already tired, already doubting themselves before the day even began. And what you have to understand is this: the mind doesn't just respond to reality, you create. What you repeatedly tell yourself becomes the lens through which you see the world. If your inner voice is weak, fearful, and inconsistent, your life will reflect that weakness, fear, and inconsistency. Greatness doesn't start on the outside. It starts when you take control of what you allow to live rent-free in your mind. You have been talking to yourself your entire life, whether you realize it or not. Every decision you make, every risk you take, or avoid every time you push forward or pull back, there is a voice narrating the moment. And if that voice is filled with excuses, comparison, self-pity, and doubt, it doesn't matter how gifted you are. Talent cannot overcome toxic thinking. Potential cannot survive negative programming. You can sit in the best environment with the best mentors, the best opportunity, and still sabotage everything because your mind has been trained to expect failure instead of greatness. Some of you were taught limitations before you even knew what possibility was. You were told what people like you don't do, where people like you don't go, and what people like you can't become. And over time, those external voices became internal beliefs. You stopped hearing them as opinions and started accepting them as facts. But hear me clearly. Just because a belief has been with you for a long time does not mean it's true. It only means it's familiar. And familiarity is dangerous when it keeps you trapped in a small version of yourself. Rewiring your mind for greatness requires you to challenge thoughts that feel comfortable but are destructive. It requires you to question the stories you've been telling yourself about why you can't win, why it's too late, why others are ahead of you. why others are ahead of you, why your past disqualifies you. Those stories may feel logical, but logic without vision will keep you average. Greatness requires a higher level of thinking, a disciplined thought life, and the courage to confront the mental habits that no longer serve you. You don't rise to the level of your motivation. You fall to the level of your thinking. That's why motivation alone isn't enough. You can watch speeches, listen to music, feel hyped for a moment. But if your mind is still programmed for survival instead of excellence, you will always retreat when pressure shows up. Pressure exposes programming. When life hits you hard, you don't become someone new. You reveal who you've been training your mind to be all along. The mind is like a muscle. Whatever you exercise gets stronger. If you constantly rehearse fear, fear gets stronger. If you constantly replay failure becomes familiar. If you constantly compare your journey to someone else's highlight reel, insecurity grows. But if you deliberately practice discipline, resilience, focus, and self-belief, those qualities begin to dominate your responses. You don't accidentally think great thoughts. You choose them, especially when everything around you is trying to pull you back into old patterns. One of the hardest parts of rewiring your mind is letting go of mental shortcuts. Excuses are mental shortcuts. Blame is a mental shortcut. Comfort is a mental shortcut. They allow you to avoid responsibility while feeling justified. But greatness demands ownership. When you stop blaming circumstances and start examining your thinking, you take your power back. You realize that even when you can't control what happens to you, you can control how you interpret it, respond to it, and grow from it. Your thoughts shape your habits, and your habits shape your destiny. That's why small, repeated thoughts matter more than big, occasional breakthroughs. The way you talk to yourself during ordinary days determines how you perform during extraordinary moments. Greatness is built in the unseen hours, in the quiet discipline of choosing better thoughts when nobody is watching, applauding, or encouraging you. Some of you are fighting battles in your mind that nobody else can see. You're smiling on the outside, but doubting yourself on the inside. You're working hard, but questioning whether it will ever pay off. You're showing up, but secretly wondering if you're enough. And I need you to hear this. Your mind is not your enemy, but it can become one if left undisciplined. You have to stop letting every negative thought sit at the table. Not every thought deserves your agreement. Some thoughts need to be challenged, corrected, and replaced. Rewiring your mind means you stop asking, what if I fail? And start asking, what if I grow? It means you stop interpreting struggle as a sign to quit and start seeing it as evidence that you're stretching beyond who you used to be. Growth is uncomfortable. Transformation is messy. And greatness often feels lonely before it feels rewarding. If your mind isn't trained to endure discomfort, you will mistake temporary pain for permanent defeat. You have to learn how to speak life to yourself when silence is loud, when results are slow, when progress feels invisible. Because the truth is, most people quit, not because they are incapable, but because their mind convinces them that the effort isn't worth it anymore. That voice will tell you to rest when you need to push, to quit when you need to persist, and to settle when you were built to rise. Greatness requires mental repetition. You don't just say once that you believe in yourself, you reinforce it daily. You don't just visualize success once, you train your mind to see it consistently. You don't just resist negativity occasionally. You develop a system that filters what you consume, who you listen to, and how you process information. Your environment feeds your mind, and your mind feeds your future. Some of you need to detox mentally. Too much noise, too many opinions, too much comparison, too much distraction. You can't rewire your mind while constantly feeding it chaos. You need moments of clarity, focus, and intentional thinking. You need time to remind yourself who you are, what you're working toward, and why quitting is not an option. Rewiring your mind doesn't mean you never doubt yourself. It means doubt no longer controls you. It means fear shows up, but it doesn't get the final decision. It means failure happens, but it doesn't define you. You begin to see setbacks as feedback, delays as preparation, and pressure as proof that you're being shaped for something greater. At some point, you have to stop negotiating with your lower self. The version of you that wants comfort over commitment, excuses over execution, and familiarity over growth will always have a reason to stay the same. But the version of you that is destined for greatness requires sacrifice, consistency, and mental toughness. And that battle happens in your mind long before it shows up in your action. You don't become great by waiting for confidence. Confidence is built by keeping promises to yourself. Every time you do what you said you would do, even when you don't feel like it, your mind begins to trust you. Discipline creates self-respect. Self-respect fuels belief. That's how rewiring happens, through action aligned with intention, repeated until it becomes identity. Your future is listening to how you talk to yourself today. Your goals are responding to the thoughts you rehearse daily. Most people never reach their potential, not because the world is against them, not because they lack opportunity, and not because life is unfair, but because they allow their own minds to betray them. The thoughts you nurture, the habits you reinforce, and the stories you tell yourself define the ceiling of your achievements. You may be capable of extraordinary things, but if your mind has been trained to expect mediocrity, to fear struggle, or to settle for comfort, that ceiling becomes invisible. You can't see it and you can't break it. Greatness begins when you confront the narratives inside your own head and refuse to let them control your life. Every day your mind is bombarded with messages from everywhere. Social media, peers, family, advertisements, and past experiences all speak to you, some consciously, most unconsciously. And unless you choose carefully what you listen to, your mind will absorb whatever is loudest, most repetitive, or most familiar. Familiarity is dangerous. Familiar thoughts feel safe, but safe does not equal growth. Safe does not equal progress. Safe does not equal greatness. Growth demands that you listen to the voice that challenges you, that pushes you, that disrupts your comfort. If you want to rewire your mind for greatness, you have to feed it consistently with thought that elevate, expand, and refine. Some of you have been living your lives waiting for permission. Permission to act, permission to pursue, permission to believe you're capable. But the truth is, the only permission you need comes from within. The problem is that your mind has been conditioned to wait for opportunity, to wait for clarity, to wait for motivation, to wait for others to validate your potential. And while you wait, life passes. Greatness does not wait. Greatness demands you step up before you feel ready, before conditions are perfect, and before confidence shows up. Waiting only reinforces doubt. Acting rewires your mind. Rewiring your mind begins with awareness. Awareness is seeing the thought patterns that are holding you hostage. Awareness is recognizing the internal dialogue that whispers, you can't do it, or this is too hard, or you're not ready. And once you are aware, you can intervene. You can challenge the lies your mind has been telling you. You can rewrite the story in a way that supports growth, resilience, and courage. Most people never intervene because they are comfortable with excuses. But comfort is a slow killer. Comfort ensures that your potential remains dormant. The mind is a battlefield. Every day there are forces pulling you toward fear, distraction, and mediocrity. And if you are not actively training your mind, it will default to survival, not expansion. Greatness is not built by accident. It's built deliberately. It is built by choosing thoughts, habits, and actions that align with the person you want to become, even when it is uncomfortable, even when no one is watching, even when it feels like nothing is happening. That repetition over time rewires your neural pathways and reshapes your identity. Your habits are the proof of your thinking. You can talk about being disciplined, focused, and committed, but if your actions do not reinforce those beliefs consistently, your mind will continue to doubt you. Neural pathways in the brain strengthen with repetition. What you do daily creates the architecture of your thinking. If you consistently choose excuses, fear, and avoidance, those pathways dominate. If you consistently choose courage, discipline, and persistence, your mind adapts. This is why showing up even when you don't feel like it is more powerful than motivation itself. Motivation fluctuates, but repetition solidifies identity. Most people fail not because of a lack of resources, but because of inconsistency in their inner dialogue. They want to be successful, but allow themselves to rehearse failure mentally every day. They want to grow, but feed their mind thoughts of doubt, envy, and comparison. They want to be strong, but avoid the discomfort that builds resilience. Every day, your mind records the signals you give it. What you say to yourself is more important than what anyone else says about you. If you want to rewire for greatness, you have to speak to yourself with intention, clarity, and courage. Fear is one of the most powerful inhibitors of rewiring. Fear feels real. Fear feels urgent. Fear feels unavoidable, but fear is often just a signal that growth is near. Fear signals that you are about to do something that matters, something outside your comfort zone. The difference between people who grow and people who remain stagnant is not that the former are fearless, it's that they act despite fear. Every time you choose courage over comfort, you strengthen the pathways in your mind that reinforce resilience, confidence, and persistence. Your mind is also heavily influenced by the stories you consume. If you spend your days immersed in drama, negativity, or the accomplishments of others, your own mind begins to normalize distraction and dissatisfaction. Comparison is the thief of focus. It tells your mind that someone else's success diminishes your opportunity. Rewiring requires that you curate the inputs that enter your mental space. You must surround yourself with ideas, people, and messages that push you forward, not hold you back. Rewiring the mind requires discipline, not desire. Desire is fleeting. Motivation is temporary. Discipline is consistent. Discipline is showing up when your body wants rest, when your emotions want comfort, when your mind wants to quit. Discipline creates patterns that your mind cannot ignore. And over time, those patterns become identity. You start to see yourself as someone who finishes, who fights, who persists, who overcomes. Identity cannot be wished into existence. It must be built through repeated intentional action. Adversity is also a crucial component of rewiring. Struggle, challenge, and pain are not punishments, they are lessons. The mind grows through resistance. Every failure, every setback, every moment that tests your patience is a brick in the foundation of resilience. If you approach life expecting it to be easy, your mind will resist growth when things get difficult. But if you see challenges as training, as signals to adjust, as opportunities to grow, your mind begins to embrace pressure instead of avoiding it. Rewiring is accelerated through persistence under pressure. You cannot outsource greatness. No one can think for you, push you, or discipline your mind consistently. External input helps, but the real transformation begins internally. You are responsible for the thoughts you entertain, the habits you reinforce, and the actions you take consistently. Greatness requires ownership of your mental life. You must audit your thoughts, filter out destructive patterns, and replace them with thoughts that empower. This is not easy. It requires relentless attention. But it is necessary if you want to achieve extraordinary results. The mind resists change because change feels uncomfortable. It prefers the familiar, even if the familiar is limiting. That's why most people settle for mediocrity. That's why most people talk about potential without realizing it. But discomfort is the currency of transformation. Every time you choose to persist when your mind wants to quit, every time you choose to focus when your mind wants to scroll, every time you choose action when your mind wants procrastination, you are literally rewiring your neural pathways. You are teaching your mind what reality is supposed to look like. Rewiring also requires emotional control. Your emotions are signals. They tell you what is happening, not what you must do. Too often, people react to emotion instead of responding with intention. Anger, fear, doubt, and frustration can all be leveraged if you learn to interpret them correctly. Instead of allowing emotions to dominate your thinking, observe them, acknowledge them, and make a conscious choice that aligns with your vision. Over time, this creates a mind that is resilient under pressure, unwavering in focus, and disciplined in action. One of the most neglected aspects of rewiring the mind is reflection. You must review your thoughts and patterns regularly. You must ask yourself, what am I rehearsing mentally? What stories am I telling myself? Which beliefs are holding me back? Reflection allows you to identify toxic thinking before it solidifies. Without reflection, your mind drifts into autopilot, defaults into old patterns that no longer serve your growth. Another component is patience. Rewiring the mind is not instantaneous. Neural pathways take time to strengthen. Habits take time to stabilize. Identity takes time to crystallize. You cannot measure growth by short-term results. You must measure it by whether your mind is consistently showing up in alignment with your values, purpose, and vision. Patience ensures that you do not abandon progress just because it is invisible in the moment. Accountability is essential as well. Surround yourself with people who will challenge your thinking, question your excuses, and celebrate your growth. But remember, the ultimate accountability is to yourself. Your mind listens to itself first. If you repeatedly break promises to yourself, your mind loses trust. If you repeatedly honor your commitment, your mind gains confidence. That internal trust becomes a foundation that no external obstacle can shake. Language matters. The words you speak to yourself are the seeds your mind will grow. Stop using diminutive language. Stop saying, I can't. I'm not ready. It's too hard. Replace those statements with intentional declarations. I am capable. I will figure it out. I will persist. The mind internalizes repetition. The thoughts you repeat are the beliefs you embody. Not the person you are becoming, not like the one you were yesterday. Rewiring your mind also requires exposure to challenge. Comfort does not build greatness. Comfort preserves the familiar, and the familiar limits your potential. Seek experiences that stretch you, that test your patience, that push you to think differently. Every time you operate outside your comfort zone, your brain forms new pathways, new habits, and new possibilities. Greatness is always just beyond the point of discomfort. The stories you tell yourself about the past shape the present. Stop reliving failures as proof of inadequacy. Stop letting old mistakes dictate your potential. Use the past as evidence that you are still standing, still capable, still able to grow. Every scar is a marker of survival. Every challenge you endured is proof of resilience. Rewiring your mind requires that you reinterpret your history, not as a limitation, but as preparation for greatness. Finally, the ultimate lesson in rewiring is choice. Every moment is an opportunity to choose the thought you entertain, the emotion you nurture, and the action you take. Your mind is a garden. If you feed it weeds, it will grow weeds. If you feed it seeds of discipline, courage, and vision, it will produce a harvest aligned with your goals. Rewiring is simply conscious cultivation. You choose what lives rent-free in your head. You choose which narratives define you, and you choose who you are going to become in the process. Greatness begins inside the mind. It is not external, it is internal. Your circumstances, your past, and your environment may influence you, but they do not define you. What defines you is what you allow your mind to believe about itself, how you respond to challenge, and how consistent you are in nurturing the thoughts that serve your growth. Rewire your mind. Feed it with courage, discipline, clarity, and purpose. Protect it from negativity, doubt, and fear. And when you do, greatness will follow. Not because you were lucky, but because you built it inside yourself. When you reach the end of this journey, or at least when you pause to reflect on what you've learned today, it is crucial to understand that the end is not a stopping point. The end is not a final chapter. The end is an invitation, a challenge to apply everything you've internalized into your life. The conclusion of this speech is not meant to be the last word. It is meant to be the starting point. It is meant to ignite in you a fire that refuses to be extinguished, a fire that reminds you daily that your mind is not a passive bystander in your life. It is the engine, the governor, and the architect of everything you will ever achieve. If you leave here thinking that greatness is something that happens to you, you will leave disappointed. Greatness does not happen. Greatness is created moment by moment, thought by thought, decision by decision. And the final truth I want you to walk away with is that the responsibility to rewire your mind, to reclaim your destiny, and to live the life you were built for belongs entirely to you. Every moment you spend doubting yourself, every moment you allow fear, distraction, or negative thinking to creep into your consciousness is a moment wasted. Time is the one resource you cannot replenish. And the truth is, your mind is constantly stealing moments from you if you allow it to run on autopilot. Every mental conversation you have with yourself matters. Every thought you give permission to live rent-free inside your head shapes the trajectory of your life. You may not feel it now, but in 5, 10, or 20 years, the sum of all those little thoughts will become the measure of your accomplishment or the evidence of what could have been. That is why rewiring your mind is not optional. It is survival. It is the difference between living a life of regret and living a life of purpose. The beauty and the challenge of the mind is that it is a double-edged sword. It can be your greatest ally or your fiercest enemy. It can lift you to heights you never imagined, or it can trap you in a cycle of fear, doubt, and mediocrity. The difference lies in awareness, in discipline, and in intentionality. You cannot passively hope that your mind will choose greatness for you. You must choose it for yourself. You must feed it. You must train it. You must fight for it. Every book you read, every conversation you engage in, every reflection you take, every moment you pause to correct a destructive thought is a brick in the foundation of your greatness. And the process is never complete because the mind is alive, evolving, and constantly under siege by both internal and external forces. The war for your mind never ends, but that is exactly what makes it the most valuable battlefield you will ever fight. Look, no one is coming to save you. Life does not owe you clarity, opportunity, or fairness. The world will not wait for you to feel ready, and people rarely validate your effort before you've done the work. If you sit around waiting for permission, you will be left behind. Greatness requires ownership. It demands that you stop blaming circumstances, stop waiting for others, and start holding yourself accountable for the thoughts you cultivate and the actions you take. Every decision to step up, to show up, to act in alignment with the person you want to become strengthens the neural pathways of courage, resilience, and discipline. Every choice to settle, to hesitate, to allow doubt to dominate weakens them. Your mind is like a garden. What you plant, what you nurture, and what you allow to grow determines the harvest of your life. And let me tell you this, it's not enough to just act when it's convenient. It's not enough to feed your mind with positivity occasionally or to visualize your goals when you feel motivated. True rewiring happens in the unseen hours, in the moments when no one is watching, when the world is quiet and your mind wants to retreat into comfort. It happens when you face resistance and choose discipline over desire. It happens when you take action despite fear or uncertainty. That is when the invisible work becomes visible results. That is when habits solidify into identity. That is when the mind that once doubted itself becomes the mind that drives destiny. You must understand that failure is not a signal to quit. Failure is not proof that you're incapable. Failure is a lesson, a feedback loop, a challenge disguised opportunity. The mind that has been rewired for greatness interprets failure differently. It sees mistakes as instruction, setbacks as growth accelerators, and obstacles as tests of resilience. Every time you rise after falling, every time you persist after being told no, every time you refuse to be defined by circumstances, your mind strengthens. Confidence is not given. It is earned through repeated demonstrations of courage, discipline, and action. You do not become great by accident. You become great by proving to yourself over and over that quitting is not an option. It is also essential to remember that your environment influences your mind more than you realize. The people you spend time with, the media you consume, the conversations you entertain, they all shape your thinking, your beliefs, and your expectations. Surround yourself with voices that challenge you, elevate you, and push you toward your potential. Distance yourself from those that reinforce doubt, mediocrity, or negativity. Rewiring is not just about internal discipline. It is also about curating what you allow to influence your mental landscape. The mind is constantly listening, absorbing, and adjusting. Choose what it consumes wisely. But rewiring is not just about external influences. It is about internal vigilance. Your self-talk, the internal dialogue you have, is the blueprint for action. If your mind constantly rehearses fear, limitation, or failure, your actions will mirror that narrative. If your mind rehearses courage, possibility, and perseverance, your life will reflect it. The key is repetition. The mind does not respond to occasional reminder. It responds to consistent input. Speak to yourself with intention. Remind yourself daily of your strength, your purpose, and your capability. Correct the lies you've been telling yourself. Replace them with truth, clarity, and vision. Your mind will begin to follow the commands it is consistently fed. Now, let me be honest with you. This work is hard. Rewiring the mind for greatness is not easy. It is uncomfortable. It requires sacrifice, persistence, and unwavering focus. You will encounter days when your old patterns scream louder than your vision. You will experience moments when quitting seems easier than pushing forward. You will face pressure, fear, and self-doubt. That is exactly why this work is transformative. If it were easy, everyone would do it. If it were comfortable, greatness would be ordinary. But you are not here to be ordinary. You are here to push, to stretch, to endure, and to rise. And the mind that learns to persist under pressure is the mind that achieves extraordinary results. One of the most profound truths about rewiring the mind is that it is cumulative. Small, consistent efforts, what you think, how you respond, how you act compound over time. You may not see progress today, tomorrow, or even next month, but like a river cutting through stone, repeated effort reshapes the landscape of your life. Every choice to feed your mind with truth, courage, and discipline strengthens the neural pathways of possibility. Every habit of procrastination, fear, or negative thinking entrenches limitation. You are building the architecture of your future, not with one monumental action, but with the countless small decisions you make every day. And here is the ultimate reality. Greatness is not a destination. It is a process. It is a daily commitment to show up, to think intentionally, to act decisively, and to refuse to settle for less than you were created to achieve. There will never be a perfect moment to begin. There will never be a flawless set of circumstances. You will not suddenly feel ready. But if you commit to the work, to rewiring your mind, to cultivating resilience and discipline, your actions will create readiness. Your thoughts will become aligned with purpose. Your life will begin to reflect the greatness that has always been within you. Rewiring your mind also means embracing responsibility. You must stop blaming circumstances, other people, or your past. Those are distractions from the truth. You have the power to shape your future thoughts you choose and the actions you take. You may not control everything, but you control how you interpret events, how you respond to setbacks, and how you move forward. Responsibility is liberating. It is empowering. It is the foundation upon which all sustained greatness is built. And let me remind you again, action is the key. Rewiring does not happen through passive thought, wishful thinking, or momentary inspiration. Rewiring happens through doing, through showing up consistently, through facing fear, discomfort, and resistance with discipline and resolve. Every time you push past excuses, every time you choose persistence over avoidance, every time you act with intentionality despite uncertainty, you are literally retraining your brain. You are creating new pathways that reinforce courage, focus, and strength. Action solidifies the mind. Action transforms potential into reality. You also have to embrace the inevitability of setbacks. Challenges are part of the process. The mind that is rewired for greatness does not fear obstacles. It expects them, it prepares for them, it adapts to them. Every challenge is a test of mental resilience. Every setback is an opportunity to practice perseverance. Every failure is evidence that you are stretching beyond your previous limits. Do not fear failure. Do not be paralyzed by fear or doubt. Use them as fuel. Let them sharpen your focus and drive your determination. Finally, as you internalize all of this, know that the most profound transformation comes from alignment between thought and action. You cannot simply think differently. You must act differently. You must act differently. You cannot simply imagine success. You must pursue it relentlessly. You cannot simply desire greatness. You must commit to it daily in every decision, in every thought, in every interaction. When thought and action align, the mind becomes unstoppable. Identity becomes undeniable. And the life you once imagined as distant or impossible begins to unfold naturally. So, as I close this speech, I challenge you to take one final step. Beyond listening, beyond understanding, beyond agreeing. Take the step of commitment. Commit to your mind. Commit to the discipline of thought. Commit to the relentless pursuit of growth. Commit to challenging yourself when it is uncomfortable. Commit to consistency when it is inconvenient. Commit to responsibility when it is easier to blame. Because the truth is, the mind that is rewired for greatness will not only change your life, it will define your legacy. And that's the gift you owe to yourself, to the world, and to the person you are destined to become. Greatness is not waiting for you somewhere out there. It is waiting inside you patiently, persistently, and powerfully. Rewire your mind and you unleash it. Feed it, protect it, challenge it, and strengthen it. Show up for yourself every day. Fight for your future with every thought and action. Discipline your mind because the mind shapes destiny. And when you do, there is nothing in this world that can stop the life you were meant to live.